folks, and welcome to another episode of Conversations. I'm Pav.
And I'm Chitra. Well, today's episode is about art, creativity, and well-being. As per usual, we start off with a quote, a joke, or an interesting fact. Pav, you are itching to tell me something.
I am. I've got a joke for you.
Go for it.
So what type of shoes do artists wear?
Maybe something with paint?
Sketches. Get it?
Mom joke?
I liked it.
Well, I actually have an interesting fact as well for you. Did you know that art competitions were part of the modern Olympic Games, and medals were handed out in categories of architecture, music, painting, sculpture, and literature?
Fascinating. I didn't know that. That's very cool. Well, I think speaking of art, we would like to think of ourselves as very creative, and we enjoy the arts ourselves, wouldn't we say?
Yeah, definitely. Look, I'm a Bharatanatyam dancer. I've learned since I was 5 years old. That's Indian classical dancing. And art is very much a part of who I am. I've also learned music and singing, and I do play the odd instrument every now and then. And as growing up as a child as well, I've loved coloring and sketching. And I think for me, all of these different forms of art really bring peace and joy into my life, and they actually help me make meaning out of life as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the way you mentioned that you like colouring in, because, you know, when you go to like restaurants and they give you like the kids like, you know, coloured pencils and some kind of, I'm usually the one colouring and drawing at the end, but not the kids.
Good on you.
But look, I totally agree. I also was part of a dance group growing up called Karma. I started a dance school of my own prior to children. I used to sing as part of a Bollywood orchestra. And to be honest, my idea of a fun day is actually wandering to the Australian Art Gallery and just wandering, and gives me a lot of peace and a lot of joy.
Love that. And we actually have a special guest today. I really can't wait for this conversation because it's all about who we are. And this special guest is successful and passionate about just that, art, creativity, and well-being. Let's go meet her. Can't wait. We have with us today Neelam Gopalani. Neelam is an artist, a curator, a creative facilitator, and a well-being practitioner. She has held community-focused creative projects, solo shows, and has been part of art festivals. She is also passionate about the well-being benefits of the creative arts. Her art mediums include painting, textiles, installation, and photography. And Neelam is currently studying a master's in creative arts therapy. She works in a global marketing role at Arab. Welcome, Neelam. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you. Really excited to be here.
So nice to have you. We thought we would kick off by asking you just a little bit about your childhood and your heritage and where you grew up.
Great. So I was 1 year old when my family and I moved to Australia. My sister was quite young, and we joined family here, which included my grandparents and my auntie and uncle and my cousins. So quite a tight-knit family. And we're from the Sindhi community, so we already had a history of migration, you know, due to the partition. So coming to Australia was kind of the next step for our family. And the community was quite small at that time. And so my parents established the first Sydney Association. Sydney Association. It's a tongue twister. Which still is a very thriving community today, and the community's growing now. And it was really nice to be part of the original group that were here in Australia back in the 80s.
Wonderful, yeah. And were you always a creative spirit?
Yes, would be the simple answer to that. I would do anything creative I could get my hands on, you know, from calligraphy to poetry to dance, which I know we have in common, painting, obviously, and, anything creative, really. It was a beautiful outlet for me.
Lovely. So speaking of art, you're an artist and a curator.
Yes.
And you recently had an exhibition at the Eden Gardens where you had an installation in Macquarie Park in Sydney.
Yep.
I would love to know a little more about this installation, but also you talked about your heritage and your background.
Yep.
So how did that influence your art, particularly at this exhibition?
Yeah, so I might just kind of take a step back, actually, in answering that question and just talk a bit about the creative process.
Sure.
So when I did my visual arts degree, there was a strong focus on conceptual art and, really focusing on the conceptual aspect of making in addition to the actual making process itself. And what that meant was it wasn't about jumping in and kind of making a finished product from the get-go. It was actually about sitting with what it is you're actually working with. And so in the case of this particular, artwork, I was really thinking about migration. I was thinking about the story of migration, how we came to Australia, how we, collectively came to Australia and what that journey was like. And so, so with the kind of creative process, it's about spending time really, kind of feeling those aspects and connecting with that story, and then thinking about, okay, well, how do I bring that to life through the materials? How do I bring that to life spatially? And almost like honoring that, that journey through the creative process. And so with this particular project, we had a space. So this was a student exhibition, and we had the space, which was Eden Gardens, and we had the opportunity to go around and to actually look at different parts of the park and kind of go, okay, I feel like my artwork would best fit here. And in my case, I had a sort of mural type project which I wanted to create, and these beautiful red walls, these kind of orangey red walls, reminded me of saffron. They reminded me of mangoes. They reminded me of like India and also the outback in Australia. And that felt like such a perfect canvas for this particular story, which is called The Walk Forward. And essentially it honours the steps that our families have taken to come to Australia and to come with nothing, leave so much behind and really come with very little and to take steps forward. And so you've got this kind of really beautiful white motif, and there's inspiration behind how I created those particular figures, but I've kept them white quite specifically to sort of link with that idea of coming with very little, and life was kind of simple in a way, but also complex in other ways. Being migrants in Australia, and they just took steps forward and and created that foundation, which is what we are, kind of standing on their shoulders essentially.
Look, I know I love how art can be used to influence or raise awareness of various issues that are happening in our world, and you've advocated for sustainability and climate change through your art. Would you mind just talking through a little bit of that?
Yeah, so I think in this day and age, all professions really, there's a role for us to take action towards, mitigating the effects of climate change and how can we live more sustainably. And so I guess like some of the ways I do that in my practice is like through the actual topic itself that I'm working with. And in some cases that's been, climate at the core of that. And in other cases, it's the actual material itself, So I've got this one big piece I did on a big kind of wooden, it was actually, a giant piece of wood that had been repurposed, wood. So that in and of itself, I think, materially, like I'm often playing with like, how can I, sort of reduce my imprint, so to speak. And there's one work called Rebirth where I literally use materials from the site. So this particular work takes place out in public spaces and usually on a piece of like the earth. And so then I'm using, obviously with the right permissions, using materials from that space to create the work and then putting it back, which I think is, a practice that we, could all sort of learn from. But I think that part of the reason why I got so passionate about climate is because, you know, it's kind of a very present issue for us, but also had the opportunity as part of my visual arts degree to go with a group of students to Palau and so some Micronesian country, and to be with members of the community and to learn about the country, to learn about the climate issues that they were facing. And they took us to this place which was near the water, and it was basically a deserted community. It was, you know, you saw all the infrastructure of where people used to live, but because the sea levels had risen, they had to leave. And also, you know, the salt water was kind of mixing in with the fresh water, and the fresh water is what's used to cultivate, you know, the crops that are part of the sustainable food supply. So it was quite eerie, you know, seeing this place, and that really stays with you. And I think, you know, having that really sort of like firsthand experience of a community that's, you know, genuinely having to change their entire life because of, you know, what's happening, you never kind of like, you never forget that. And I think it stays with you, and it stayed with me, you know, in these different ways. And also at Arup, being a firm that's so focused on sustainability, I've been able to kind of work with them on, you know, how can we talk about art and the role of artists in taking everyone on the journey when it comes to, you know, dealing with climate change. So the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals talk about how important it is for us to take all communities on the journey, and you know, art being such a powerful storyteller, you know, is such an important kind of piece. And you know, working with artists and creative institutes to help people feel that connection to what's going on and hopefully inspire them to take different actions is also something that I've been able to kind of help facilitate as part of my role at Arup.
That's very powerful. Thank you for sharing that with us. So I want to talk a little bit about creativity now. And Neelam, for us, we were talking about this during the introduction of this video as well. We are creative souls as well. And for me, particularly with Indian classical dance, with Bharatanatyam, being vulnerable is so important in that creative process, right? Like, I need to dig down deep into my emotions, be honest with myself, internalize what I'm feeling, and then be able to express that through my art form, which is dance. So I'm really curious to understand your thoughts on vulnerability and how that shows up within that creative process for you, or from what you've known or seen.
Yeah, it's such a great question, and I feel a bit of vulnerability in answering that, right? Because you know, vulnerability can be hard. It's not I think it
takes a lot of courage.
It does take courage, and you know, in fact, even coming here today, you know, before coming, there was a part of me that was going, oh, I'm a bit nervous about this. You know, I've spoken obviously in different you know, forums, and we know each other, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a part of you that kind of senses that. And so I sat with my, you know, my paper and my paints, and I actually gave voice to that part of myself. And so I think vulnerability is an active process, and I think there's something really important about feeling safe to be vulnerable as well. You know, when you have the right support around you, or when you're working with a material that you feel somewhat comfortable with, and when you're feeling comfortable with the audience in a way, like, I think that can support that process of being vulnerable. But I'll give one little story, which was probably the first time in terms of my creative work that I felt the most vulnerable. And this was during my visual arts degree. So I noticed you've got your books. I have journals that I've collected since I was like 5 years old, and I've kept all my journals. And,
wonderful.
And I decided to kind of turn this into an artwork for one of my classes. And so what I did was I actually went back through some of the journals, and I kind of took down things that sort of spoke to me from what I had written as a child. And I created this installation that had my writing, I wrote down kind of certain extracts from this, from the journals, and then I used a different color pen and I wrote my adult response to that child part of myself. So it was like having a conversation with like your
Past.
with your younger self, exactly. And so the way the class worked was that you made these artworks and you left them in the space, and then you went out, hung out with your mates while the teacher was marking them.
Yeah.
And so, that in and of itself is quite daunting, right? Because if you have no idea how the work is going to be received, you're not there when it is received. All you get afterwards is the response from your facilitator and a mark, essentially. So anyway, the facilitator, he comes out, my teacher comes out, and he, kind of says to everyone, you can come back here. And he sort of turned to me and he just looked at me, and I don't remember the exact kind of contents of what happened, but I remember him just putting his hand on his heart and just kind of going, whoa.
Yeah.
And that to me, in a way, is the power of vulnerability, right?
Yep.
Because he obviously saw that work, he felt it because it came from that place inside me, which is what you're talking about before you dance, right? Is that part of you that's like really tender and, and when we give voice to that part of ourselves, like that in and of itself is so beautiful, but it's also just so human. And I think that was the response that, he gave me, was just a human response. It didn't need words. It was just okay, I felt something.
I think I can totally relate to that as well, because I think that connection with the audience when you when you have been vulnerable, when you show the world your emotions through your art, that connection is deep and real. And when the audience can feel it, I think that's the powerful part of it.
I mean, we've all heard of writer's block.
Yeah.
Is there anything such as an artist's block? And how do you manage something like that?
Yeah. So, yes, there is. There's probably a couple of ways I'm going to answer that question. One is, does the story need to be told at that point in time? So the idea of a block, kind of says, well, we need to like move through the block, right? And in some cases, actually, there's a just sitting and being with it and kind of feeling into like, okay, is it that this story needs to be told now? Or actually, is it that I need to look at it through another lens? And so I think there's space for me in that to kind of go, okay, can I look at it through another lens? So one of the ways you can look at it through another lens is to use a different sense. So if it's something kind of quite visual, well, then close your eyes and visualize it internally, or think about, okay, well, how could this sound? Like if there's a certain topic or an issue that you're working with, like what would it sound if I was to like make a sound that kind of connected me with this thing? And it doesn't matter what the sound sounds like. No one needs to hear the sound, but it's actually just about tapping into a different sense in a way, and seeing what happens. And then the third thing I would say is to get in touch with the why. And often when we get in touch with the why of what we're doing or the why of what we're creating, it kind of connects you back to the heart. And for me, the heart is often that really important part of ourselves that just like unlocks things.
Neelam, life can be difficult. We have all had our share of difficult times. People go through grief and loss and suffering. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts on how art or creativity can help with that process of healing and dealing with that grief and that loss and that suffering.
So grief, like any emotion, is a very human experience, and it's not something that you experience once and then it's kind of done, right? It's almost like a process in a way. And when I think about emotions that maybe haven't been processed, I think about them as a kind of almost like a ball of energy that's like sitting inside you. It's like, okay, in some cases, something might have happened in a community. Like, so for example, there's a flood or a bushfire or whatever, like in that moment, you're not thinking about how you feel. Like you feel something, right? It's a very real feeling, but at the same time, it's what's the action that we're taking here, right? So we kind of switch into action mode, and then later on, if there's the opportunity or if we're willing, we can actually open up that part of ourselves, which is the feeling part of ourselves, and that kind of that ball of energy almost that sort of like sits inside you in a way, waiting for an appropriate time to be addressed. And I think that grief is one of those kind of really charged emotions that can take so much time to unravel. And so what I've kind of been learning about, creative processes and how they can help grief is they can help you gently, start to unravel those parts of ourselves that maybe we haven't, for whatever reason, been able to tend to. And we can do that in a really gentle way. And I really love that actually art can be used in a way that kind of suits a particular person and what they're comfortable with. Even the choice of materials can be done in a way that it's like something that's comforting, a material that's really comforting, that is kind of comforting you at the same time as giving you access to a way to start to sort of unpack that, that ball of energy. And so I think one of the other ways that it can also be used is in a community setting as well. Like communities have experienced something that they have in common that might have been really challenging, actually creating a space where as a community we can come together and go, oh, like that thing happened, or like, oh, like let's just connect as humans and acknowledge that. And then the art almost acts as a way of like giving those emotions and those very human responses a way to kind of like channel, right, or to express and to kind of come from within and sort of come out in a sense. And so I think it's such a beautiful and valuable way of like supporting people to process emotions, whether they be really simple emotions or whether they be, deeply held emotions as well.
Okay, I'm going to change tact a little bit and we're going to move to Wellbeing. Tell us about the wellness project you've coordinated.
Yeah, so being a yoga teacher, wellness has been like part of my DNA almost, at least for the last 20 years. And so when I joined Arup, I was quite open about my other sort of passions and interests, and initially started teaching yoga at the organisation, and I've taught yoga in other organisations and in schools as well. So that was kind of a nice way to sort of like dip my toe in the water and be with colleagues and do a class before the day started, and just to feel like we've started the day on a really nice note. And so Arup, being quite an innovative firm and quite open to people sort of bringing their authentic self to work, gave me and a couple of colleagues the opportunity to unpack something kind of quite cool, or actually to collaborate rather on something quite cool. So we basically kind of came together, pulled together all of our passion and interest in this area and came up with this 10-minute approach, which we call 10 at, and we essentially get our colleagues together at 10 o'clock in the morning. We have a particular process that we follow that involves community, sound and light, and then people come together 10 minutes and then they kind of go off and carry on with the rest of their day.
All right. So in today's digital age, we know that we should be switching off our phones and cutting digital, information. But also we should be doing the 30 minutes of meditation and yoga and building that within our routine to manage our well-being. But I'm just wondering, do you have any tips on how we can include just little things in our day-to-day routine for people who may not have time to sit for the 30 minutes of meditation?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is find something that really works for you. Like, what is it that you feel kind of drawn to? Is it breathing exercises? Is it journaling? Is it meditation? Is it an art practice? And choose a thing. It doesn't actually matter what it is. Just choose a thing that you feel drawn to do that actually would make you want to do it, right? Like, let's not kind of go with the really hard practices that that mentally feel difficult to do. Choose something that's actually going to work for you. Make it manageable for your lifestyle. So like 30 minutes may not be achievable for some people, but actually 5 minutes or 10 minutes might be. And I think that choosing something that you know you're going to be able to commit to is like super important. Then create like a structure for yourself. So whether it's, okay, I'm going to do this at 9 o'clock every day, or I'm going to do this at 3 p.m. every day, have that structure and use whatever it is that's going to help you with that. So I know you talked about turning off tech, but if tech is going to be the thing that's going to help you, like a calendar reminder or you're using an app, right? An app might, have like a 7-minute meditation or a 2-minute meditation even, like use the technology, right? That's going to be the thing that helps you show up and do it every day, then do that. And then do it every day for 30 days. So we know that like to change or to implement a new habit, you have to have that kind of regularity of practice. So forget the fact that you want to do it kind of on an ongoing basis. Just start with 30 days. Do it every day for 30 days and then see what happens after that. And then maybe stop for a day and see how you feel. And you'll know something's working if you've been practicing really, diligently for a while, and then you stop. You will notice the difference. And if you don't notice the difference, maybe it's not the right practice for you. And that's okay too. Find something else and adapt. So, right now for me, I have a daily painting practice. And so like every day without fail, I sit down and I paint. And for me, that's my kind of current outlet. And the structure that I created for myself was, okay, every piece is on an A4 piece of paper. This is not about making a canvas every day. It's just like a piece of paper in a pad of like watercolor paper. I've chosen a very select number of paints so that I don't have to think about it, right? Like I show up, I spend a couple of minutes, as much time as I have. Like it doesn't need to be a half an hour session. It can literally be 5 minutes, but the goal is to every day put paintbrush onto paper.
Okay, well, we have a final question from the two of us. So look, I look at life as a creative process and a creative journey. I don't want to live in an autopilot mode. I want to live in an intentional way. And I look at it as putting together the pieces of the puzzles that are thrown at us and making something beautiful out of it, right? That's the journey of life. I am really interested to understand your thoughts about life being a creative process. Another heavy question.
It's a great one. It's such a great question. And I think the first thing that comes to my mind when you say that is embrace the mess.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so, in a way, life was already tough when we came to Australia, right? Like you come to Australia and we experienced the experiences we had as migrants here. And that was tough. So in a way, you're almost trying to create order in amongst what already feels like a challenging life experience, right? And so I think as a result of that, we try and order things, but actually don't embrace the moments when it's just actually messy. And it's okay for it to be messy. And I think one of the things I'm kind of learning as I get older is that the mess is kind of okay. It's all right. And it's human. And so I think when I think about life as a creative process, like there are moments where, there are puzzle pieces that we can kind of put together, and there's moments when it actually just feels messy, but that's part of the process, right?
Correct, yeah.
And it might be that you actually need to dismantle the puzzle pieces and put it together in a different way, or that like one puzzle piece doesn't work for you anymore and you take that out of the picture. And so I quite like that idea of the puzzle, but also like having a really like dynamic kind of relationship with it, and letting the moments where you don't know what's going to happen show you what might be next, or help unfold a pathway that you may never have taken. And yeah, I think there's something really nice about about that. And maybe because I'm an artist, I'm able to sort of like embrace the mess really innately. But I think it's a really important kind of life practice.
And well, we are coming to the end, and we always end with a question from the previous speaker, who was Sheila Jayadev. So the question is, if you could spend 3 months living anywhere in the world, where would you go?
Such a hard question. I spent a year in India in 2008, and it was like one of the best things I ever did. And I mean, I always would love to go back to India. You know, it's like home, and there's so much kind of connection with culture and with community and spirituality that is so present in India. I'm just going to go with India, actually. Like, I could come up with another cool country, and there's definitely a list of countries.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I would love to go and spend a number of months in South America for sure. But like India is like definitely where the heart is. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's all we had for today. Thank you so much for being here with us, and welcome, sitting in this space with us and doing the exercise before we started. It's been so lovely.
Thank you, Neelam. It's been such an enlightening conversation.
Yeah,
Just understanding your thoughts about art, creativity, and just the wisdom that has come out of us chatting to each other. So thank you for being here, and loved having you.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Hi, folks. I hope you enjoyed that episode. For me, it was so interesting because, one, I was able to connect with an old friend again, which was so nice. And two, I felt like it was so different to what we've seen before in this space of art and creativity.
Yeah, I totally agree. I loved it. For me, art is a part of who I am, dance especially, and music as well. So for me, a lot of the things that we talked about really resonated deeply. So I loved it.
Great. So what were your key takeaways?
I have so many, actually. Look, I'm going to read out a few.
Yeah.
I love what she said about art being really there to understand ourselves more deeply. I think that's really true.
Yes.
I also loved the fact that she said to get in touch with the intention, the why, the purpose of why we want to express a certain emotion through art.
Mm-hmm.
And I also loved the fact that when we talked about vulnerability, she mentioned that being in a safe, comfortable environment, being tender with yourself, being gentle, that really helps with vulnerability and, being able to be courageous to open up yourself.
Yeah. And look, with me, I'm just going to go with the practical tips she gave because I thought they were great and very easy to implement. So 1, find something that works for you, whether it's breathing, whether it's journaling, it has to work for you. 2, make it manageable to your lifestyle. If you can't do 30 minutes, do 5. 3, create a structure. So figure out a time which works for you. 4, do it for at least 30 days so it creates a good habit. And 5, stop for a day and see if it's working. And if not, iterate if you need to. I thought that was great.
I hope you all enjoyed the show.
And that's it from us, your hosts, Chitra and Pav, signing off. Until next time.